Actor and former U.S. Senator Fred Thompson discusses his latest book, Teaching the Pig to Dance. The Russian Tea Room in New York City hosts this 40-minute talk.
Senator Thompson, how did you decide to write your memoir, Teaching the Pig to Dance? This might sound like Groundhog Day to you.
I was hoping you'd ask that question. I thought that I'd write my autobiography. Everybody else in America has, so I thought it was my turn, and I was going to write about all the usual suspect subjects and about, you know, how I left Lawrenceburg and had the opportunity to do a lot of interesting things and various adventures, and most of them serendipitous and accidental. But anyway, a federal prosecutor and the movie business and a country lawyer for a couple of years and the United States Senate and running for president and things like that. And so when I turned it in, my publisher liked the first part better than any of the other. I didn't get very far, I must say, before I showed him what I was up to, and I liked the first part, so we talked about expanding it. And I really liked that idea because I was finding that what gave me the most satisfaction and joy and allowed me to use a little humor, the humor I grew up with and I thought was so appropriate for what I was doing and my growing up years, because that's what my family is about. My father's the funniest guy I've ever known. My grandmother was the same, my granddad, and my mother, who was the brunt of so many of my dad's jokes and so forth, had to have a great sense of humor too. So I did it, and I entitled it Teaching the Pig to Dance, because there's a saying where I come from that when you're engaged in a fruitless activity, it's kind of like teaching a pig how to dance. Oftentimes it's a waste of your time, and it irritates the pig. And of course, this is my book. I get to play the featured part in my book. I am the pig and in this book, and I was hard-headed, and I was a slow learner in many different ways. Barely got out of high school. Had to be given my French test twice before I could graduate. Would have probably gotten thrown out of high school if one particular thing that I tried to pull off had succeeded. But you know, there came a time in my life, I won't get into too much detail, there came a time in my life when a lot of things happened to me at once. And I had to straighten up and learn some lessons. When you do bad things happen to you, and vice versa. Good things happen. And it was a story of second chances and redemption, maybe a little bit. And because of a handful of a few people that had faith in me when there was no evidence that I deserved or merited any confidence, I was able to turn things around and live this wonderful American experience where there's so many doors out there that are cracked open for you. And you know, if you have the confidence to walk through them, a lot of wonderful things can happen. And that little town and my parents and a handful of people gave me that confidence to do that, and taught me some basic lessons that I certainly didn't always live up to. But they were always there, and they were always my grounding point that I kept trying to come back to, and still do.
How did Howard Baker decide to pick you for the Senate Watergate Committee? And could you describe your famous question to Richard Nixon's former Deputy Assistant, Alexander Butterfield, which you stated, "Are you aware of any installations of listening devices in the Oval Office of the President?"
Yeah. A lot of my Republican friends said I should have minded my own business and not asked that particular question. Howard Baker. I often wondered why Howard Baker asked me to come up. I think, knowing what I know about Washington now, that he decided that it was better to have somebody he knew and trusted than it was to have someone who had experience and competence. And I had been a United States attorney for 3 years, and was just a couple of years out of law school. Out of law school, I went back home, got to be that country lawyer that I thought I'd always be for 2 years. Went to Nashville, thought I'd just be there a while, go back home. Never did. But I did get to I did get to prosecute most of the more important criminal cases in Middle Tennessee there for a while. And I remember kind of parenthetically how proud I was to hang my certificate of appointment on the wall signed by the Attorney General of the United States, John Mitchell. And the first time I met John Mitchell, I was interrogating him across the table a short time later. But anyway, Lamar Alexander, who now holds the seat that I held, which was the Howard Baker seat, Thompson, Alexander, later to be, after this episode I'm about to tell you about, became governor. He's now senator. He was a young lawyer there, friend of friend of Howard's, came to me and said, Howard Baker wants to talk to you about managing his campaign in Middle Tennessee. And I'd been in the U.S. Attorney's Office, as I said, for 3 years. And I remember the conversation. I said, well, how much does it pay? And he said, nothing. And I said, I'll take it. And so I went with him on the campaign trail. And ironically, the day I left the U.S. Attorney's Office was the day of the Watergate break-in. I didn't realize that until I went way back around, years later, was writing a book called At That Point in Time, which was my Watergate memoir. And so anyway, when Watergate finally came into fruition, Howard Baker called me up and said, I want you to come up. And I think there's probably more than a little truth into the joke, that I just told. He knew me. We'd had a chance to get along, and he wanted someone that he knew that he could trust. And as it turned out, there were a lot of intrigue and a lot of back and forth. And do you communicate with the White House? And if so, who with? And when is it appropriate and when is it not? How do you handle the other side? How do you cooperate in an investigation on the one hand and protect your guys on the other when they're being treated unfairly? Because going in, you don't stand up at the beginning of a trial and say he's guilty and let's go home. I mean, going in, you don't know all of what we know now. So you have to play, our role was one that was kind of new and unusual and delicate in many respects. And I think he just wanted someone that he knew was a competent lawyer, but someone that he trusted.
Why did you resign after 2 terms as a senator? And also, being from Tennessee, why do you think Al Gore lost the state and the election?
Why did I leave the Senate after 2 terms? After 2 terms, I longed for the realism and sincerity of Hollywood. Actually, it was not 2 full terms. I took Al Gore's unexpired 2-year term when he became vice president. And then I ran for a full term. I had to run 2 elections in 2 years, within 2 years. And then a full 6-year term. Then I could have, and placed term limits on myself. It's something I've always felt would be a lot better off if we had a lot more of that. We've got term limits on everything else except members of Congress. And so I could have served another term consistent with my pledge, but some things happened in a tragedy in my personal life, and I was tired of the place anyway. I never intended on staying, and so I always thought it would be a good idea to leave town 1 step ahead of the sheriff and 2 steps ahead of the undertaker, if at all possible. And so I did. Why did Al Gore lose the Senate? I think in many respects he changed his position on a lot of things that he stood for in Tennessee. I don't remember a lot of the details now. During the campaign, I had him down just like that. But I think on the pro-life, pro-abortion issue, guns, tobacco, for sure. I mean, he was up there really bragging about what a tobacco guy he was, when he was in Tennessee. And so he was running nationally now, and, he changed his position on 2 or 3 things that Tennesseans didn't particularly appreciate, the substance or the change.
Why did you decide to run for president? And when you did decide to run for president, many of the pundits had you as the front runner for the nomination for the Republican Party. Why do you think it didn't go as planned?
Well, I was the front runner for about a week. I mean, as I say in the book, one of my friends who thinks he's a lot funnier than he is said, you know, that your presidential campaign must have been the most hectic 2 weeks of your life. But I didn't think it was that funny. But, concerned about the future of our country, concerned about the next generation. Jerry and I have a couple of young children now to go along with my other children, grandchildren, and so forth. And I've been so lucky, and the stuff the book's about, I mean, it's really only in America. And not that I've achieved any great heights in any of these areas, but you clearly are blessed. I talk about the role of luck in a person's life, and I tell a story about how it's a combination of the good Lord, but it's eventually up to you. I tell a story about the farmer, where the preacher comes up. The farmer's has just got through clearing the new ground, as we call it back home. You know, all the stumps and everything, you know, they'll bend and hit you in the leg, and he's plowing a mule and all of that, and just hot and thirsty and tired as he could be. And he finally finished it, and the preacher came by and said, the Lord sure has blessed you with a wonderful field here. And the guy said, yeah, but you should have seen it when the Lord had it all by himself. And so talk about the luck and happenstance in any way. And I felt like I was in a position to uniquely as in a small group of people that had a shot of doing something about it. And I had even a more unique position, is that I didn't really fear losing. I think I did it for the right reasons. A lot of people interpreted that as insufficient fire in the belly. That if you're not craving it more than life itself since you were a junior in high school, that you don't want it badly enough. And maybe that's what it's become nowadays. I don't really know. But I didn't have that. I've never had that. Didn't have it when I ran for the Senate. But and I won by more votes than anybody in the history of Tennessee there. But with regard to people who've never met you before, don't know anything about you, and other primary states and all, it's a different kind of a thing. And obviously a different kind of job. So I don't know the key to it. I guess, the people were smarter than I gave them credit for, I guess, is the answer.
And what about with these constant comparisons by the press of calling you the new Ronald Reagan and stuff? Could you tell us a humorous story or two about that?
Well, the press always understates things, I didn't know they'd said that in a long time, but I appreciate any comparison. But only on one level, and that is the strength of Ronald Reagan. I think not was that he was an actor. I can sympathize with what he said. He said nobody ever accused him of being an actor until he got into politics, and but it wasn't any of that. It was because of the strength of his beliefs, and you could tell that, and it shone through. And because he believed, he was believable, and therefore he was a great communicator, and had a unique talent in that respect. So that was his strength. And but we make a great mistake. We think we're ever going to replicate him. We'll have, the country will produce other people that are as great in their own ways. I'm convinced of it. We've done it before. I think we'll do it again.
And please tell us, how'd you become involved with Law and Order? And is it surprising to you that the average American recognizes you more from Law and Order than from the Senate?
No, I get both. They say, "Hey, Senator, I enjoy you on Law and Order." I mean, the best of both worlds a lot of times. And a lot of times I get other things, So I was talking to a lady in the airport in Los Angeles a while back, and she said, "I can't tell you how much, you know, I've enjoyed watching you on television and so forth. And my husband is waiting on me. Would you come and say hello to him? And he's a big fan too. And so, oh yes, ma'am, miss you. After about 10 minutes of this, he finally get him and so forth. Said, honey, you'll never guess who, Dr. Phil. So I'm never surprised at anything. Flight attendants, you know, you were my daddy's best friend in high school, right? You know, so people recognize someone, but they're not well known enough to know why they're recognized. But they look familiar, and they draw the doggonedest conclusions. And sometimes my favorite was when a lady would come up, a younger lady would come up and say something like that. Say, you know, you look familiar to me too. Actually, I'm a superintendent at a girls' reformatory. You don't I know you? Don't you? Oh no, I've never been. No, not me. So you have a little fun with it from time to time.
And moving on to your your film career, No Way Out is a brilliant film with Gene Hackman. When was your first inkling? Was it reading the script of the surprise ending? When did you realize what was happening?
Yeah, actually, I don't remember that, but that would have been the answer to it when I read the script. And that was the second thing I did. Roger Donaldson was the director of the first thing I did, was Marie. And incidentally, how I know this establishment as well as I do, and why I'm so delighted that it's open again and so beautiful, is I used to come here often with Peter Moss, who wrote Marie, and they made the film about it. But anyway, Roger's second movie was No Way Out. So he called me up and said, let's see if you can play anything besides yourself. And so that's how I got that part. And so they sent the script, and I'm sure that's when I learned it, yeah.
Moving on to The Hunt for the Red October, which you appeared in, do you think that Tom Clancy's book is based on a true and secret Russian submarine?
I don't know. There's a lot of speculation about that. Howard Baker, you know, was very, I don't say suspicious, that he had a lot more information than maybe he was letting on. He thought it was too close, you know, to some of the things that he knew about. But I really have no idea. I mean, I got a chance to get acquainted with Tom Clancy years, you know, after that book came out. Well, about the time, not too long after we made the movie. But I didn't have nerve enough to ask him.
And Robert De Niro and Martin Scorsese, you appeared with them in Cape Fear, brilliant remake. Would you consider doing another film with both a brilliant actor and director?
You'd have to let me get back to the hotel and get my suitcase before I left. Yeah, absolutely. I think that business is so addictive because I don't know of any other thing where you're presented with, you know, here is a new adventure. It's a new set of people. It's oftentimes a different place. It's a story. You return the first page of the script and you know the name of your character and you wonder when and where and how and what and so forth. And then you go off and you do it. And anything they pay you for eventually turns out to be work, I've discovered. And there's a lot of hard work, especially for those who have leading roles and so forth. But yeah, I've had the best of both worlds in many respects. And I was living in Tennessee when I was doing most of the movies that I've done, and I'm still doing them. We've got Secretariat coming out in October that I think is a Disney movie. That I think it's going to be a good one. I got a couple of other things in the hopper that I don't know when they'll be out. But being able to live a kind of a real life back, you know, Tennessee, Virginia, or whatnot, where I am now, and go out there and participate in that from time to time, and is a wonderful combination of things. I was practicing law most of the time that I was doing that, And if I had a case pending, I couldn't take a movie in that time, obviously, and vice versa. You know, if I was committed on a movie, I wouldn't take a case where you had to be in court, and I had other lawyers that cover for me until I got to court or something. Cut it close a time or two. It's probably might even make a book. I'm not sure, but I got the best of both worlds. But yeah, I'd love to. I mean, the very idea. I was no more likely to have been, you know, standing as a scene I do in the book. I flash forward a little bit and talk about how I got in the movies, and I'm in talk about after having done a couple, found myself in Durango, Mexico, one morning, rolling a big truck tire through a couple of doors, breaking the doors down and cussing out Paul Newman. And I wouldn't have thought that I'd be doing that, you know, but Fat Man, Little Boy, we were doing it. But, you know, it's a wonderful, luxurious adventure, especially for someone who's not supposed to be doing that anyway. I mean, I had the luxury is that if I fail, no big deal. I'd go back home. You can't try a lawsuit either. But if it worked, then it was just a wonderful addition to my life. And it's more of a knack. You know, I'm more comfortable before a camera than I am standing up before 10 people making a speech for some reason. It's a different thing, and everybody's got to find out for themselves. There's probably a bunch of people in this room that's never had the opportunity more than I did. I never was in a high school play. I didn't think it was cool. I wasn't interested at all, and obviously never had an acting lesson. But it's so yeah. I'd welcome. I'm always open to the opportunity, the right deal. Clint Eastwood. You know, being directed by him, acting with him. I'm always cussing these guys out, it seems like, you know, Clint Eastwood and Paul Newman and guys like that, and who incidentally, two great guys. Paul's passed, of course, but.
And the last question, before we open it up to a couple of audience questions, Senator Thompson, are you prepared this evening to announce your run for presidency in 2012?
I gave at the office. I'm sorry. There's a difference between being a fool and a damn fool, okay? But as I like to say, I threw my hat in the ring and the people threw it back. So I know what I'm not wanted in that regard.
Ladies and gentlemen, can we get somebody in the back first? Gentleman all the way in the back row. Nicholas? Yes.
So first of all, huge fan. Hunt for October particularly inspired me to attend the Naval Academy. So one of the reasons there.
Really?
Yep.
Wonderful.
So the question I have for you is about your movie Alleged, and any thoughts you can share on the movie and the trial of which it refers to as well.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's one of the things that we've got in the can, so to speak. I don't know when it'll be out, but I had the opportunity this last summer to participate in a movie called Alleged, and I don't know how to explain it other than it kind of recreates the Scopes monkey trial inside the context of a broader movie. It's not all about a recreation of the Scopes monkey trial, but we do a lot of it. And one of my great thrills in the movie business was working opposite Brian Dennehy. I was William Jennings Bryan, and he was Clarence Darrow. And, you know, a guy that you admire. I saw him in the Goodman Theater, you know, years ago in Chicago, and what a great stage actor, you know, and you know, goes to my point. I mean, you know, knocking heads, you know, with one of my idols. So I forgot exactly what your question was, but anyway, I don't know when it's going to be out, but I'm looking forward to seeing it. I assure you, probably more than anybody else here. I haven't seen it yet.
There was a lady, there was somebody over here. Yes, please.
Mm-hmm.
There's a mic over there for you.
Since you were running for president, the political sands have shifted a little bit, and there's a Tea Party movement now, which is nominally aligned with the Republican Party, but I don't think anybody owns it or could. What do you think the Republican Party has to do to keep it in the fold, and what do you think the Democrats might do to try to pry it loose?
Oh, I don't know if it'll come down to that question or not. I think there's a natural alignment among the Tea Party folks with the Republican Party. I think most people realize how difficult it is for a true party, third party, to start up and get qualified in all the states and that sort of thing, and also the danger of just acting as a spoiler and allowing the guy you don't want to win the most to actually win. So I don't see it happening that way. I think there'll be a natural alignment based upon the next presidential race, based on the persons involved, the people involved, more than the party affiliation. We know who the Democratic nominee will be, and my guess is the Republican nominee will be someone who will attract majority of the party and the Republican Party and the Tea Party. I think the Tea Party is very important from a political standpoint, and also kind of is a big fat canary in the coal mine. I'm surprised in many respects why this hasn't happened earlier. That's one of the reasons, getting back to why I ran. I talked about the next generation and so forth. We've been knowing for a long time that we were on the road to bankruptcy in this country. Some things have happened recently where that's been brought into fruition. It's not just that people were mad at Obama or just a matter of race or anything like that. He came in with a lot of goodwill. He came in, his poll numbers all indicate that. He came in with strong support among independents and all that. A lot's happened in the last year and a half that has kind of crystallized things, brought things into fruition at a time when we realize that we can't afford a lot of the things that we're doing. We lay more on top of an already broken and failing system. Clearly with the notion that the next people to come along will be left with this responsibility and not this current crowd of politicians. And the notion of having this long drawn out debate of something like this particular health care approach, and the American people speaking every way they know how in terms of public opinion polls, in terms of election in New Jersey, election in Virginia, election in Massachusetts, for goodness sake, Ted Kennedy's old seat. They're basically saying, whoa, this goes too far. This is not where we want to go. This is going to wind up costing us trillions of dollars. We don't trust the government anyway to tell us, especially anything about costs. It's never been borne out. It's going to cost a lot more than we ever realized. So don't do this. Did it anyway, and did it in a way that was backroom, deals at its worst. And the stimulus package turned out to be, in large part, a partisan political handout and payoff to people around the various states and municipalities and unions and so forth. So a lot of things converged to people said, this is enough. And now it's being stoked by the newscasts every night when we watch the people in the streets in Athens. And you say, wait a minute, how do they get that way? All right, well, their debt is about, 115% of their GDP. In a decade, the experts say that ours will be 90. This expert says that if the experts are saying 90, it'll be at least 100. And that's Greece neighborhood, folks. And you see, Greece is about it's all about German and French banks, mainly, right now. And they're having to bail out Greece in order to bail out their own banks. And they're having to come back and rely on us eventually for that, through the International Monetary Fund and through the Fed and other things. A year and a half ago, when we passed the TARP bill, about $50 billion of that went to AIG went to European banks, mainly the Deutsche Bank in Germany. A direct pass-through when we didn't even try to get them down, you know, as any normal entity creditor would. So we're about to bail out European banks now for the second time in a year and a half. And that hasn't fully come into fruition yet. So, like I say, we've been going down this road for a long, long time. It was totally irresponsible in the Bush administration to pass that prescription drug bill. It's totally irresponsible to pass this health care bill that they finagled the numbers just unbelievably to get it under $1 trillion. And just the other day now, the OMB came back and say, by the way, so far we're off 130 billion. So it's clearly over $1 trillion. It's just an unholy mess. And that's what's fueling all this now, and I think it's powerful. '94, I was part of a sweep when I ran. Didn't realize it was going to be such a good. You always say that, you know, the most brilliant politicians are the ones that either have a rich daddy or run in a good year. And I ran in a good year, but it's nothing like what I feel. Maybe proven wrong, but I couldn't feel it until a couple of months before the election. People are angry and upset. I'm interested in seeing these races tonight, although a lot of them will not particularly be indicative of much because they're primaries and so forth. But you know, I think we're going to see more and more of the same.
The gentleman over there. Yeah.
Hi, with 50 to 60 trillion in unfunded entitlements that are projected in this country, do you think we're going to be able to avoid a VAT? Or do you see that coming very soon down the road?
Well, that's a good question. You know, the president has appointed a commission now, and as I like to say, Congress can handle any problem in the world until it gets to be serious. And so now this has been handed off to, and the common wisdom is, well, any idiot knows you got to raise taxes and cut spending, right? Raise taxes, cut spending. Raise taxes, cut spending. Well, what kind of tax are you going to raise? You can't. By their definition of wealthy, you can't tax the wealthy enough to get it. You're not going to tax the middle class before he's reelected again. So, yeah, that leads you directly to a VAT. And there's going to be a hellacious fight over that because if it doesn't make economic sense, leave the fairness issue out of it. There are a lot of us walking around here whose parents had 8th grade educations, who have been in every tax bracket and worked their way up, the not rich yet crowd, you know, that have had a good year or two, finally, a good year or two. Now they're a castigated, you know, group in society to be taxed out of existence and to be excoriated in the media and all that. But leave all that aside. It's been proven that regardless how much you raise the tax rates, you're going to get about the same percentage in relationship to the economy. If you raise tax rates, you're going to have less growth in the economy. If you lower tax rates, you're going to have more growth in the economy, and you wind up with about the same revenue, about 18, 19% historically, regardless. So it makes no sense economically either. So I'm not going to go gently into that good night. I think that the first good faith effort needs to be on the spending side, and I wouldn't mind a VAT, frankly, if they would do something about the income tax while they're doing it. But Europe's experience has been to have both the VAT and the income tax, and it keeps going up. And now the average VAT in Europe is around 20%. Think of that on top of the income tax that we have now, and you're looking at the future of America. And you ask why I ran for president. Your call.
Please, Harry, and then the lady over there last two questions.
You're absolutely correct about the unaffordability of health care and Social Security. And unless we stop our foreign adventurism and a few other things like the spending, the best way to handle this, I think, would be a flat tax, a progressive flat tax starting above the poverty level. and maybe have a couple of tiers, like up to 275, then another up to 500,000, another above that. What do you think about that?
I love it.
Eliminate all the deductions.
I love it. I'll give you one even better than that. One that I proposed during the campaign, and that is have kind of what you suggested and have it as an alternative. You can keep the old tax system that we have today if you want to, or you can choose that direction. What about that?
Never worked.
Why?
It's too complex to me. Nobody can figure it out. You need 3 accountants.
We're living under it now.
That's why there's so much cheating. The only way they can survive is by cheating. So eliminate all the cheating.
I'm talking about what's politically palatable. And when people say that it's not fair or something like, you know what the first attack on anything like that is, you know, it's going to be unfair and this group and that group, and say, okay, let's do it the way we're doing it now. You do it the way we're doing it now. And there's no answer to that.
Everybody be in the same boat.
The lady in the back last question.
Well, since you are excluding yourself, who do you think are the Republican forerunners for 2012, and are there any surprise candidates out there?
Oh, well, if I named them, it wouldn't be a surprise anymore. No, I don't know. I really don't know. I have faith. You know, nobody looked, I guess George Washington didn't look like a general or a potential president, you know, when he was out there, you know, making mistakes, you know, when he was a soldier and stuff like that. And so I have a lot of faith that we'll produce what we need if good people will reward those kind of people for speaking the truth. I hope we still have got some people who are, we're bringing them up who will do that, who remember those things that they learned, that I learned a long, long time ago, that you come back to some simple yet so important truths that made this country what it is today. Sounds corny, but it's really true. And we've got a lot of potential there. I like Mitch Daniels, the governor of Indiana, for example. I like this guy, Pence, the congressman, and he's a bright young guy. The guys, you know, that ran last time when I was running, you know, I won't comment on them. I've had, you know, too many experiences, ups and downs, and I've made my views known about all that. I don't want to, you know, kick anybody or endorse anybody in terms of that crowd. You know, the usual suspects, they'll probably all be back out there. But, and that's fine, you know, in this game, I mean, one of the winning formulas, maybe the only winning formula, is to keep running until you win. And you know, Richard Nixon did, and that's your life. And you know, we'll see. I mean, the jury's not in totally on that yet. But I think there are also some people out there, and maybe some we don't know about yet, who might offer themselves up. Sounds like a sacrifice, doesn't it? But is that it?
Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Thompson has kindly agreed to sign all audience members' books, and if you'd like an additional book, you could just queue up in the back. Please join me in thanking Senator Thompson for the entertaining address.
Fred Thompson is a former Republican senator from Tennessee from 1994 to 2002, an actor and a radio talk show host. He was also a Republican presidential candidate in 2008. For more information, visit teachingthepigtodance.com.